Hey, Shelby, do you have a minute to chat?
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, I know this is short notice for you, but I was lucky enough to get some time on Bruce's calendar to talk about the reorganization. And I know you've been hard at work putting plans together, and I really wanted to give you the opportunity to sit down with him. So he's got some time right now. If you're able to join me, and let's just sit down and walk him through what you've got planned and just have the opportunity to have some exchange around that, okay?
Absolutely. Let me clear my calendar.
Great. I really appreciate it. So, Bruce, thanks again for taking the time to sit down with Shelby and I here.
Hi,
Um,
everyone.
Hi, Bruce.
hey, Bruce, if it's okay with you, I would like to really have the opportunity for Shelby to share some of what she's put together here. I know how much we're all concerned about this reorganization, and I feel like we really can't over prepare enough. So,
Mhm.
I'd like to give Shelby that opportunity here and just to have some dialogue around it.
Absolutely. And Shelby, it's super important. We've got multiple divisions we're reorging here and designing. We got to have this communication and this plan. And, we don't want to falter through any of these different functional areas. So please educate me and share me what's the plan.
Absolutely. And I understand the concern. I know it's coming up very quickly, but just to reassure you, we've been working tirelessly on this. It's been our top priority. So I myself have been leading the charge and working with all of our different COEs. All of the leaders in those organizations have been prepped, ready to go. We've been starting to work on what the plans look like, as well as all of the scheduling and specifically with the communication teams. Also, been meeting with each of the VPs and different one on ones, just getting them prepared and ready as they're going to get bombarded after these changes are really communicated out to the organization.
Absolutely. And we don't want to slow down any of the hiring and any of the other internal
Mhm.
work and production that's going on. So, is the messaging to the recruiting and the TA organization, and then obviously the
Mhm.
functional areas, communication is a really key here thing for me.
Yeah, and that's been one of the VPs that I've been staying really closely partnered with on this because obviously with our brand and everything going on with the organization, we want to make sure that we're still recruiting, just like you mentioned. So that will not stop. So we've been partnering very closely with them on all of those changes.
And then the
Yeah.
internal team too, right? I mean, we've got to retain our talent. We can't mess
Mhm.
this up with, having people get concerned and wanting to leave after all of this, right? And it's a good thing for the company, but this is the leaders really need to know how to make sure this is rolled out appropriately.
Yeah, and actually, Bruce,
Mhm.
one to that point, one thing I think is excellent that Shelby put together is really anticipating those questions and having a guide and a script for leaders with Q&A. So we have a
Okay.
common message and a common way for all of our leaders to face their employees and answer those questions in a consistent way. And I think the work she has done on this has been really good and will really shore things up as far as keeping the troops happy, making sure they understand where we're at, and having that consistent messaging, I think, is
Mhm.
going to really be helpful. So
Okay, we
if
got
you
48 hours, guys. I mean, this is going to get rolled out, so we need to make sure everything is done, including a synopsis for all the C-suite here and the organization. So please get that to us. Follow up. Let's have another meeting, Amy, to be able to ensure that everything is all
absolutely.
clear. I'm sorry for micromanaging this, but you could tell how important this is for the organization.
Yeah, it's the most important thing we've done in a long time, and you have every confidence that we're prepared, and we will get those things out rolled out effectively. Not only just sending them out, but doing the follow up meetings, conversations, and just making sure there's the opportunity for an organic exchange around it to make sure everything's well understood and that everybody's feeling comfortable and ready to go in 48 hours.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we'll reconvene tomorrow.
That sounds good. And
Absolutely.
again, Shelby, any other items you want to ask or any other questions you have for Bruce?
Anything you need from me.
Just want you to know again that we have got this covered. It's been top priority. We understand the confidentiality and the concern of the entire business and the organization. So if you need anything before our meeting tomorrow, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
I appreciate it. Thank you both. Obviously, I know how important this is for all of us and the work that you've been doing. So thank you. Appreciate it. And we'll see that obviously as we roll this out. So looking forward to next meeting.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thanks,
Thanks.
Bruce. Thanks, Shelby.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Talent Revolution, Tales from the Trenches. I'm Joe Shamba.
And I'm Jill Caniglio-Kirk, and I'm excited about this topic today that we're going to explore, the HR business partner. It's something near and
Yes.
dear to my heart because it's something that I've really been for a very long time. And I'm really excited to dig into it and explore it further.
The HR business partner, I think it's one of the best topics to go through because it's a really great partnership that needs to, and part of why we've started the conversation of the whole podcast into the partnerships of HR and TA. And for everybody on listening in, this is an awesome episode for a couple reasons. A, the topic, and B, we have a special guest. We have brought on an HR business partner with a little foundation of TA, a little, Joe kind of got that one snuck in there. But to welcome Briana Hebner to the show. Welcome, Bri.
Thanks, guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you and really appreciate you being our first guest, too. So, the inaugural episode with a guest. But for everyone, Bri comes with 10 years of experience in HR, and it really spans multiple things of HR from talent acquisition, as I mentioned, HR and HR business partners. So, Bri, if you want to give a little bit of background of yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm native to Michigan, born and raised in Metro Detroit area. I had actually previously worked with Joe. That's where we connected, and more recently met Jill. So excited to get to know you more. But I did start in talent acquisition. That was where my career began. Absolutely loved it. And I'm so glad that I fell into
Who
that
wouldn't?
role. And I love hearing people's stories of how they got into TA because you don't usually go to school for talent acquisition or to be a recruiter, maybe someday. But I guess I just fell into it. And I knew I always wanted to go into HR eventually. And that one of the companies I worked at, eventually an HR generalist role became available. And that eventually led me to the business partner route. So that's where I am today.
Well, awesome. We're excited to have you, Bree. And this, I'm going to kick it off, guys. And this is going to be, I think for everyone that's going to be on the phone and listening in, is really going, what is an HR business partner? What do you
Mhm.
guys actually do? Right. And that's always the question. What does HR
Mhm.
do? So what is an HR business partner? And Jill, kick it off in the sense of what is that in your world? And, what does it mean?
Yeah, the way I would sum up HR business partner is really someone who is strategically focused on the business, embedded in the business, working hand in hand with leaders, and really focused on aligning that people strategy to the business goals. And
Mhm.
when people say, well, what does that mean? I basically respond and say, my job is to make sure the company's goals are delivered, but I specifically focus on how we engage the people in the business to make sure that happens. And that's kind of where it all starts for me, and that embedding in the business, understanding the business, and developing that trustful partnership where I can lend my support in various areas of HR, kind of truly the generalist, I think, and wearing the generalist hat and how I can support the business in becoming more strategic, more successful, and achieving their goals. I don't know, Bree, I would love to hear your take on it, but that's kind of how I would summarize it.
I completely agree with you on that. And Joe, you're right. Not a lot of people know what the business partner is. I truly did not when I was moving into it or shortly before that. But when I was an HR generalist, or even when I was in TA, everyone knew what an HR manager was, or at least you knew that's who you had to go to if you needed something HR related. Usually people don't want to go to HR, but if you do, you know it's the HR
The
manager.
door
At
is
least
open,
that's what you
everyone.
think.
Remember that.
Exactly. And I never had the title of an HR manager, but as a generalist, I was for a time doing dual roles. And so the difference between that and a business partner is usually a team member or an individual contributor is going to that generalist, that manager for anything under the umbrella of HR. It could be benefits, it could be comp related, it could be an issue I'm having with another employee. But as a business partner, you're working on just like what Jill was just saying, you're partnering with the business leaders. That doesn't mean we're not working with every part of the business. That is absolutely what we're doing. But usually, a very high level, we're partnering with those functional leaders, we're partnering with the CEO or the VPs, and we're rolling out what they need to be focusing on throughout the year and what their objectives are, what their goals or their key results are. And a lot of them, they're so busy on a day-to-day basis. So we have to really ground them and bring them back to what's going on with their team members, and obviously relating that to those larger business goals.
Gotcha. So where did it start? Where did it come from? Like,
Well,
you
I've had
know,
this. I actually do know because I've actually researched it. So, as someone who graduated a long, long time ago and has been practicing HR for a long time, it really wasn't part of the curriculum that I studied when I was getting my degree. But the role of HR business partner was actually introduced in the 1990s by Dave Ulrich, who is from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, right here in our hometown Michigan
sorry,
zone.
Bree.
I know, go green, but it's okay. Good job, U of M.
Right. And actually, it really was, the kickoff and the beginning of really developing the strategic partnership. And his model really looks at this role being a specific role as part of an HR team that is designed to align the HR person with the business. And in order for that to really work, you also need other partners who can do the transactional work in the HR team, and those people might be in an area of the business where they're, doing the payroll and they're answering benefit questions, right? And they're kind of the HR operations team, right? So I'm sure people have heard that term. And then on the other side of it, you also have your experts and your people that are subject matter experts. And you might have people around compensation, talent acquisition, things like talent management, right? And in his world, that was called the centers of excellence, the COEs of the organization. So in a lot of larger organizations, you may have a really defined group of people that represent all those different parts of that strategic function of HR, and how those people work in lockstep really to provide those services and make sure it's a all-encompassing partnership for the business. In other smaller companies, obviously that may not be realistic. And then I've had a lot of colleagues say, well, how does this work in smaller companies? But I think we can all still look at how we use our people's time and how we focus them to achieve the same outcomes and really make sure that we have representation in the strategic aspects of the business. Because it seems like in a smaller business, that's where people continually that person, and I don't have that time because I'm busy doing this transactional work. So that's just a little bit of history around where it came from, where it all started, and some of the different components of it.
So that's great, and I appreciate the history of it, and that makes total sense. And that it leads into the COEs, Center of Excellences, the specific areas. And those areas usually have measurable impact that goes on, right? TA, we have all the different metrics. If there's into transactions. So how do you measure impact, and what is the impact that HR business partners make? Bree, want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to the beginning of the year, right? As we're setting up our goals, or I mentioned objectives earlier, if you've ever touched on OKRs before, if you know what that is. And I think we have to continue to look at what we're doing throughout the year. Are we working? Do we have the access to a system that maybe is able to track things like that? If not, again, like Jill said, maybe we're at a smaller organization and we don't have any type of tool that can support us in that. But maybe throughout the year, we're doing different engagement surveys. We're seeing the results of those. Obviously, as the leader of engagement surveys or the distributor of in engagement surveys, as we're working with the leaders on distributing those, and we're analyzing the data and we're figuring out what the reactions are and what the responses are, our goals and objectives can very clearly be pulling from the functional leaders and what they set as their objectives throughout the year. So as we're seeing and analyzing that data, that can in turn be our response and the answers that we're looking at for impact in HR.
Yeah, actually, that exactly makes sense to me, Bree. From the perspective of my goals would really be what the business goals are. And then I would look at working with perhaps if I'm supporting more than one functional leader, as an HR business partner, what does that team need from a people perspective, and how am I going to help support achieve outcomes for that business leader when it pertains to their people strategies? It could
Mhm.
be hiring certain talent into the team. It could be coaching certain people on the team and getting them ready for leadership roles, right? So I would just say all of my goals and objectives and metrics would be tied to what does the business need, and how do I create goals specific to supporting those on the HR side.
Mhm.
So I'm going to throw a curveball into that. I mean, the business changes, right? And, as we go down January, February, it's this way. Then all of a sudden there's the left turn and a curveball that goes in. How does that play into the strategies and the impact that you're making and the goals and objectives? How do you overcome that? And that happens at big and small companies, right?
Mhm. I mean, it almost sounds like my everyday. So having to reprioritize what I'm working on, that's normal in HR. I mean, we're a supportive function. So if you got into HR not to work with people, tough luck because that's what this role is. And we have to roll with the punches. We have to be quick. We have to figure out what our day to day looks like, but we have to be 10 steps ahead, and we have to we have to know where our clients are going. Now, we don't always know exactly what that's going to look like, but we have to be able to come together and truly partner with them. And the more that you build that relationship and get to know what they need and what their function, where they're going, you should be able to pinpoint what their needs are as you go throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge part of really, as you develop that partnership, you can almost anticipate what's coming next, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
putting together those, if this happens, then I will. And if that happens, right, what are those hypothetical things that might be coming down the road? And how, what are my strategies for helping make sure that I'm not caught off guard and that I can step in and kind of help steer the ship?
So you said another common theme that we've seen in some other podcasts where you may not have heard them yet, but communication, right? And communication between your customer, between other functional areas, between the HR organizations. And, part of, I'm going to take a little piece on the TA side is there's a gap sometimes between what the business partner is going on in their world and then the talent acquisition is going
mhm.
down a path. How do, from both perspective, big or small company, what are your guys' thoughts on how do you lessen that gap? How do you partner better with? And I'm being selfish on TA, but I mean it's same thing with comp, same thing with mobility. Even the operations. Uh, who and what? How does that work, guys? Thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I don't ever want TA to come to me after the fact and say, why weren't we included in this? Why weren't we included on these plans? That's the same thing with every function, though. There should always be, if appropriate, one person from every function who is brought along the way. So there always has to be that partnership. It's the same thing with all of the functional leaders, those clients that I'm referring to. They're my partner, but so are my COEs in HR. I want them to be as quickly anticipating what's going on within my clients' needs as they need to be. So there should be this big circle of trust that we're all in together and we're very connected and understanding that. But as a business partner, I'm the one that's that liaison keeping everybody connected.
Right. Yeah, and I would say, Joe, one way I would answer that is in a healthy organization, the CHRO is bringing the right people
Mm,
together
mhm,
and
mhm,
having a structured exchange of dialogue where the HR business partners are, kind of sharing what's happening in the business, giving kind of breathing life into it for the rest of the organization, trying to paint the picture of the dynamics so that they have a lens into the business world so that they could better refine their strategies for their talent acquisition, compensation, et cetera. So I think that's one other mechanism that can
mhm,
really help an organization optimize the roles that these different people play, and creating an environment where there's trust, there's open dialogue, and there's really this two-way exchange, so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page and we're performing well together.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think that's awesome, and it's probably the right way to do it. But what I've heard and seen, sometimes it doesn't fall the way down, right? The
Mhm.
Sure.
top layer has that, but then who interprets what information should be passed down to the other folks? Because I've seen it
Mhm.
many times firsthand, and I'm using a TA perspective of it. What do you mean that position's canceled? I've just been doing this. I just met with the
Mhm.
leader, and then that's all of a sudden changed. And when that could have been mitigated in a sense, maybe it's the leader and the TA organization to say, you know what, focus on something else. But that's where I see some of that communication and gap. And a functional business partner, and there's different levels of business partners, I understand that too, with certain folks, and I guess pulling that gap together to really communicate. And I know, and this is going to be a faux pas in the sense of, well, wait a minute, TA does their thing and HR does their thing, and don't bother me because they don't know this stuff, and same vice versa. Where I think this is a perfect opportunity to pull them together, right? They should
Mhm.
know even more, communicate whatever the right cadence is. I mean, if it's really active weekly, but monthly, to really share. Because in the past I've been like, hey, have you heard this? And they're like, no, but have you heard this? And that hearsay is good. I mean, that's great communication, but it doesn't help when we have to guess, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think what I hear you saying, Joe, is we need to break down the silos and we need to make sure that there's communication at all levels of the organization and sharing the context of the business so that every group can, have that lens and that true north and understand where things are headed.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I know exactly what you're referring to, Joe, and it does make it very difficult if you don't have that leadership team that's doing a great job of communicating down. And honestly, sometimes I know they are very busy and it's difficult. You throw it down to one person and then you assume it's going to make that trickle, but it doesn't always happen. And so, as a business partner, if I'm someone coming in that is that communication point to TA, if I don't have all the answers, I need to make sure I'm asking the questions. And I need to figure out in my roll up who can give me those answers. Because on the flip side, when I have been TA, I've shared those frustrations that you've just explained to us. And I know it can be very difficult when you're just told, just cancel it. We're not working on it anymore, especially if the manager you're working with didn't know that either.
Right.
That should never be the case. So, as the business partner, I really want to pull and question as much information as I can. And I think that's the role of the business partner is always asking questions.
And I understand the confidentiality, and this is at big and small companies, believe me. And
Yes.
there's confidentiality because of leaks and different other things, but the more you can let the other COEs in on
Mhm.
what's going on, it just helps share that perspective to make sure everything's functionally rolling along in the same path, right? Because we're all as one team, and we need to keep moving that forward. And again, every organization's different and the sizes, and I totally get it, guys. And I think that plays to all COEs because they've had a comp structure going this way, and then all of a sudden, nope, we're going to go do this, right? Or I've seen it in many different facets. So it's just any way to communicate and change and really lessen that gap together, right? In the whole HR ecosystem is what I'm trying to pull the heartstrings at across the board. Anyone listening, and please share your comments in the through the podcast as well, and we would love to hear them, and we'll respond. Um, Moving into
One thing,
another. Go ahead, Jill.
if you,
Sorry.
I just want to say one thing on that topic. If leaders aren't good at communication, it doesn't prevent working level employees from developing their own forums and setting up their own meetings to share information. I would just welcome and just remind everyone that you're empowered to spend your time the way you want to spend your time. And if a leader's not organizing something, I would look at that saying, hey, then I'm going to set it up for me. And they don't need to be part of it. I'm going to invite the people I
Mhm.
want to hear from. And I think if you take that perspective, you'll be very, very surprised at how energized people are by you reaching out, and wanting to develop those kinds of relationships. So sorry to interrupt, Joe. I know we're ready to go on to something else, but that was
No,
kind of burning inside me, and I had to throw that out there.
it's
So
huge. I think you're right on the internal relationships, right? And that's huge within a company, big or small, right? Knowing your internal team across functional areas within HR and within the business, that's really what everybody should be doing and
Mm-hmm.
sharing that information. 100%, Joe.
right.
I guess where I was going is really the future, right? I mean, the evolution has changed for HR business partners in that new era of things. But what do you see the future of an HR business partner look like? What is it? What is it? What could it look like? What is it shaping towards? Any crystal ball thoughts around that?
Well, I'm happy to take that because I've seen it in many different lights so far, just in a few different companies I've been at. But I've worked in an organization that did not initially have a shared services or a people services COE. And so that role, I was doing a mix of the operations, but then also trying to be strategic, which, if you can imagine, very challenging. And so once we had that shared services, and at the company I am at now, we also have that set up where the business partner should be what we've been talking about. What Jill explained in the beginning is we're strategic, we're partnering very closely with the business. We want the seat at the table. I think, a lot of business partners were partnering with directors and above, so directors, VPs, CEOs, what have you, what that title may look like at your company. But a lot of us are not. A lot of us are individual contributors. We're not even, manager or director level. So we need to be able to have that visibility, but we also need to make sure that everyone is taking us seriously and understands what our role is. But coming back to your question, I think that we will continue to be shown in that light. And I think we will have that seat at the table if it's not there already.
Yeah, something Bree said actually made me think of what I have observed in my career. And
Mhm,
really, that is sometimes when people are transitioning into a HR business partner role, they kind of get caught up in all of this tactical
mhm,
minutia of things that people come to you with. And it's a very difficult world to navigate because I think as an HR person, you want to help people and you have the capability of doing it. But you really kind of have to take a step back and respect that
mhm,
getting the work to the right people in the organization, frees you up to really do more impactful things. And it's not to say that the work of those other people isn't impactful. They're just better
mhm,
equipped to do it. They understand the processes better, et cetera. So a little bit of a tangent, but it's something I think is a good thing for an HR business partner to take a step back and say, am I doing that in the right way? Am I directing people to the right people in my organization?
mhm.
And am I truly clearing my plate from the maybe task level stuff to really contribute to the bigger picture outcomes? So,
So that leads actually to my next question is then how do HR generalists transition into an HR business partner? Is there a class? Is there a
I feel like
seminar?
I'm clairvoyant. I didn't know you were going there next.
Like how do you all of a sudden, hey, now I'm one of those, right? I mean, it's like what does that transition look like? How do you get there? And yeah, I would love to
Mhm.
hear that.
Well, everyone's experience is different, right? And it depends on what company you work at, big, small. So, my own experience was unique, just like everyone's. But as the generalist of several years, I mean, I was at a large company, but the site I was at, I would say, was smaller. So everyone knew me as their go to person. And so that transition took quite a while for everyone to understand okay, Briana's in the business partner position now, only supporting ABC functions. Okay. But a lot of people would still come to me. And if you felt that pull to me, that relationship with me, yes, I would eventually start pushing you to the right person, but in the beginning, I was in that realm of still just answering the question. So it took me time to do the
Mhm.
same, but I had the luxury of someone actually moving quite quickly into my generalist role where I was able to refer them to that
Yeah.
person, that individual. So it was great for me, but a lot of people don't have that. You might be in both positions for quite a time, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, I find one strategy that works well that I've kind of coached other people that have reported to me on is really saying be the bridge. Be the bridge for that person to the other person and take the time the first time to introduce them, maybe get on a three-way call with them,
Mhm.
help facilitate, that transition to the correct person. And that could be a good way to say, yes, I'm still spending my time. Maybe it would have been easier for me to just solve their problem or do what they needed or get them their pay stub or whatever they
Mhm.
wanted. But if I don't invest the time in getting things to where they belong, then I'm just shooting myself in the foot, right? So I would just say
Mhm.
that's a very simple, pragmatic tactic that I think, a lot of people can employ. And then people still leave, your office feeling taken care of, cared for, right?
Right.
All of those
Customer service
things.
still, right?
Yeah. And then
Right.
they also walk away,
Absolutely.
most importantly, with an understanding of what is your new job and what does that mean,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And I think everybody in the organization needs to understand the role in order for it to really have the right level of impact. So I think that's one tactic I would say is a good one to think about.
So then, how do you all of a sudden flip a switch to be strategic? Right, you're very generalist, very tactical, answering
Mhm.
questions, processing different things, and now you've got to be a strategic business partner that's aligned to the business, that's making moves, that's looking at perspectives, that's putting org designs together, that's looking at community. I mean, we could go on and on, but how's that flip to strategic go on? Is there, again, I go back to classes or seminars or things, and again, that's a tangible thing, but how do you thoughts around that? How do you flip to that strategic piece?
Well, I took up several mentors from local to international, and even people that I've worked with in my past. I connected with them, again through LinkedIn, and they were a huge help to me through that training process and just better understanding those key differences between generalist or HR manager to business partner and being strategic, like you said, Joe. Personally, I also dug into LinkedIn and I did any sort of searches for HR business partner training. There's a ton out there that is free, but if you do actually have a budget that can support you, which a lot of us do not, but
Mhm.
if there is, I mean, online is, it's just a plethora of what sky's the limit.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is really um, I have noticed, and I'm sure other HR leaders out there have noticed when people on their own team are ready for this because they're doing transactional work, but yet they're asking certain questions and they're
Mhm.
having certain observations and they're having, they're kind of having this passion around, well, tell me more, I want to understand this better, right? So I would just say that not everyone is really cut out for strategic work.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you're an HR leader, you know the people on your team that really are perhaps best suited for this type of work. And it's not a good or a bad thing. There's people that are excel at operations and creating efficiency and doing things smarter, not harder, right? But I would just say, as an HR leader, I notice these people because of just the way they behaved, the way they acted. And I would just call it they survived the generalist tactical work, but they always had an interest and just a different perspective that they brought and really wanting to understand. And I saw a lot of curiosity in those people.
Mhm.
And I saw them, perhaps developing relationships outside of HR with other leaders and other people in different functions in a different way, kind of really wanting to get that business understanding. So when I observed those things, of course, I felt like these people have a calling to be an HR business partner. But if you flip it, you can say, if you have an interest in doing that, um, start expressing those things that are maybe you're thinking about and sharing those things with leaders and having those conversations and kind of opening up that dialogue with other professionals in the company and see where it goes.
Yeah, performance reviews, OKR reviews, all those different pieces are great forums. You mentioned another thing of seeing it, and this is a total curveball question for you guys as well. A new thing, well, not new because I've seen it and implemented it before, the talent acquisition business partner, what are your thoughts around what a TA business partner and an HR business partner, how do they play together, the differences, and the interactions?
Well, Joe, I've worked with you before, and I feel like you had that underlining title, even if it wasn't given to you. But I think if I had that right now, that would make a huge difference into having that connection point. Because when you look at the TA structure, oftentimes it rolls down, right? Director, manager, and then you have TA specialists. And there are certain TA specialists that I think just take on that role because they want to know, they question, they want to partner with HR. They are curious because they're the front runners for the branding of the business, right? They're working with anyone that could potentially work at our company. So if I had someone that was that way, I'd probably look at them for a TA business partner role. Now, if I actually had that and I knew that was my go-to person, what a difference of a relationship that would be. Not to say I don't have that with TA managers and directors. They just have such a large scope of what they're working on. They don't always have the opportunity to partner directly with us or be that go-to person. And I also don't want to consistently be bothering them. But I think if that was something that I had, that connection point, that would be huge for every role I've been in.
Jill, any thoughts on that? Or
It actually reminds me of a story. So
sure, love stories.
I've actually never worked in an organization where there's been an official title of talent acquisition
Mm-mm.
business partner. But I will say I've worked with people that act like a business
Yeah.
partner in talent acquisition. And I was in a business that was going through huge growth, and we were having shortages of talent around software in certain parts of the world. And it was increasingly frustrating, especially to our teams in the US, that we were struggling to really, compete for talent and get talent in the door. And through partnering with talent acquisition and working globally, we came up with a few strategies and a few ideas of how could we bridge that gap. And it was an example of really kind of pulling in a COE with an HR business partner situational business crisis to coming up together with solutions on how do we use overages of talent in other countries. How do we tap into that? How can we model that in the organization? How could we potentially structure something that works that kind of helps us through this gap? And it was a really cool project that we took on and worked on together. And we piloted a customer project where we staffed software with people in other parts of the world, and it had a huge outcome. It was very
Yes.
successful, and it was really something that the business started looking to. We took this very difficult situation where we were failing and struggling, but turned it into something that really kind of led to a strategy for us and saying, how are we going to look more at how we can optimize talent in certain parts of the world where it's more readily available to kind of bolster and lift up our engineering capacity. So anyway, that's an example that I can think of in my
Mhm.
career that really illustrates this talent acquisition business partner, right? People
Yeah,
that understand the business, they understand what it needs, and they want to help come together with other HR leaders and business partners to come up with a strategy that helps the company.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
think to Bree's point, a lot of the times it's usually the managers because a lot of the recruiters
Mhm.
or whatever they are just they're there to fill positions,
Yeah.
find candidates, fill the pipeline, and go. The managers get to be busy, and again, every organization doesn't necessarily have the luxury of having a TA business partner. But if you're finding the right levels to have that and to be able to grow, what I've seen is that partnership, right? And where I want to see things go, and this is uh, a Joeism in the sense of having more of a TA HR conversation, getting into those org designs, those talent management conversations to really look at who and what do we have in those organizations, where should it go, bringing in the other perspectives from, the recruiting side has a ton of knowledge of all of these
Mhm.
competitors and
Yes.
organizations and sharing that. And we do, but I don't think as frequently and as enough in the world that at least that I've played in a lot of those things, because they're very viewed at go get the people and fill the roles, where we bring in another perspective into the whole business partner aspect, right? And business partners can be done in many different facets of it all.
Mhm.
Um, into that piece, Bree, I mean, part of our world of this podcast is tales from the trenches. So any stories, things that you've had in your career that you'd like to share around the business partner or TA or HR in general?
Yes, there's been a ton of challenges. I mean, I feel like we could just go on and on if we were sitting around a campfire, right? But there's been a few, unfortunately, reorganizations or restructurings that I've had to be a part of and distribute and manage. And there's one that I was very impressed with of how the organization handled it. And what we had to do was, HR obviously again partnering very closely with the business, the COEs and our CEO and everyone high level in the C-suite. And so what I was impressed by was a lot of our HR directors were at that partnership and we're starting it from the beginning on. And this was almost a year in the making. And what I saw was throughout that 9 months to a year of ongoing continuous partnership with our high level HR team and the leadership team and the business, throughout all those discussions and conversations, the organization and then the distributing of all of the workload amongst the COE and then pulling in business partners. I happen to actually been a part of it early on because my HR manager was actually on leave. So I was in it more than what the business partners were. But once it got to that a week out, 2 weeks out, business partners were brought in. And obviously, the business partners, I mean, we were the ones that were going in, diving in with partnership of the COEs, shared services, communication, and then the ones actually having to have those one-on-one discussions with everyone that, unfortunately was a part of that list or that restructure. There was such a long list of who we had to communicate with, and obviously exiting some of those employees, and that's such a difficult, challenging time for everyone involved, but specifically those that unfortunately are no longer going to be with our organization. And that, to me, the way that the company and the top level HR team handled that, I was just blown away by the confidentiality and then the way it was distributed. And even the aftermath of that, what we went through as an organization and as a company, it was extremely challenging. But HR is the one usually that's getting the brunt of the frustrations and the challenges that are coming back. And I will not take away from the management team who is hearing it directly from these team members, but as HR, we have to continue to be strategic and figure out, okay, what's our engagement score going to look like this year? Probably not great, right? So how are we managing that with the teams that we partner with, and how is that going to look in 6 months and a year? And Joe and TA, I mean, how is hiring looking? What's the brand going to look like? So there's so many different aspects of something like that, and it's one of the hardest things that in HR, and I'm sure a lot of HR members would say, what we've had to go through is going through a restructure and having to exit employees. It's a terrible feeling for everyone. And if you're with a company or with a leadership team that can manage it in the most appropriate way, that is a huge, I don't like to use the word win, but it does make you just feel a little bit better for everyone throughout that process.
So our little scenario at the front was kind of personal, almost hit home personal for that then, Bree, didn't it?
Yes, if you could tell that it didn't seem like I was acting, it's because I have been through it, unfortunately, a number of times. Yeah.
Jill, you were going to say something.
No, exactly what I was going to say, Joe. I think we're starting to think alike now. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like we had this foreshadowing that, that's a common position HR business partners are put in. And I think in our scenario that we went through in the beginning, it was really an example to highlight the importance of having that involvement up front and that opportunity to plan and prepare and to make sure this comes off in the best possible way. Of course, it's a negative impact on the business and that people are going to be affected by it. But having that opportunity to prepare, treat them with respect, make sure everyone is handling it appropriately, I think is a perfect illustration of how it should happen. So.
Yeah, and that's where my story goes on the opposite side. And and kind of why I stressed it throughout the whole conversation, guys, is the communication piece where, in TA, we didn't know something was happening. And then all of a sudden, news hit. And it's like, wait a minute, how is this going to affect not us, but the organization, the hiring, the communication plan, how do we respond to this when candidates are going to ask us, right? And we're now on the back foot trying to circle back to get all these things. And of course, you recover and you figure it out and you roll out the communication piece. But that forefront of that is why I stressed throughout the whole conversation of how do you partner? How do you communicate? I know that it's confidential, but you've got to let some people in. And it would be my ploy to all HR folks listening, let the right levels of folks in that you can trust. And if you can't trust them, then that's a separate problem you can have an offline discussion about. But pulling them in, driving those conversations, and being on the forefront so you can not waste people's time as you drive through the regular business, because business still has to operate, right? Functional leader, we still have to, whether it's putting product out, software, whatever the types of products or organization that you work in, that still has to go on. But that communication within the whole organization is all I can stress on that side of things. Jill, did you have another story that you wanted to share, or?
No, I think I've shared the one that I wanted to. I had a positive example. I'll withhold a negative example today.
Well, again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to spin it to a positive of, communicating with everybody.
For improvement, right?
Yeah. And I've been with some great business partners where we communicate all the time and we're chatting and we're sharing and, again, me being me and people know me, I do learn the business very well and I share that and give perspective into what's going on because I think it's important that we're all in that circle of trust, in essence. And, again, withholding information doesn't help me anyways, right? It's sharing and communicating and partnering across it. And no, I'm not an HR business partner. If anyone's asking, I've never been one. I've always been in TA.
But you could be. I believe in you. I
agree. You
is this
absolutely
my performance review, guys? Is this what's going on?
That would be a fun episode. Are you up for that, Bree?
Bring me back. That will be my my year 2.
Absolutely. Well, I think then this kind of wraps things up. For anyone listening, if you've enjoyed and you've listened in, please like and share. If you have comments, we would love to hear those too. For any of us on here, we will respond and give you an answer and thoughts behind it. Also, I want to plug in, if you have ideas for other episodes, please let us know either personally or on the comments of this podcast. And then finally, I want to really appreciate and thanks Bree for coming on. You've been an awesome communicator and guest with us. We really appreciate it, and it was an honor having you on.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. Yes, happy to do it. And truly, if you guys keep this going for years to come, happy to be another guest again. And I will just say, Joe, you just made me think of, if somebody is, if you're at a company that's smaller and you're feeling alone and you came to listen to this, more power to you that first of all, you had the time and you're obviously taking it in personal time if you're a sole HR person at an organization, but just continue to utilize LinkedIn, social rooms, anything else HR related, because this is a great source. The comments, right? You guys are building a community and that's incredible. And a lot of us just feel like we need and we want to talk to somebody about everything that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I commend you guys for having this platform.
Yeah, Brie, I want to also thank you for joining. And I just want to close with one little tidbit of advice that you actually hit on earlier that we didn't really dive deep into, which is if you're interested in a career as an HR business partner or you're already an HR business partner, I think finding a mentor and someone that you can work with that maybe has more experience than you, that's a safe person to ask questions of and just have open dialogue with, kind of a coach per se. I think that's a smart move and certainly something that I have gained a lot of value out of myself personally in my career. So I want to thank you for that idea and aha moment. I know for me, I reflected on that as we went through this episode and really thought about the impact people like that have had on my career. So maybe that would be my parting words of advice for anyone out there who's either already an HR business partner and kind of wants to continue down that path, or someone who's thinking about they might be interested in it. But thank you again, Bree. It was lovely having you here. Thanks for being brave and being our very first guest. And we look forward to hearing about your career and your journey as
Thank
things
you.
continue. And we'll definitely have you back. So
Thank you, Jill. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone. Appreciate it. It's not goodbye. It's good journey. Talk to you soon.
bye bye.